Those new bombshell emails from the Epstein files appear to involve Andrew Mountbatten Windsor asking Ghislaine Maxwell about inappropriate friends.
Yes, the email sent by a user calling themselves the Invisible Man is signed off with the initial A. In the message, the sender states that the girls were left completely shattered during a royal family summer camp at Balmoral.
Well, it's important to note that the emails do not allege wrongdoing, and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has repeatedly denied any misconduct.
Now, the Telegraph's entertainment and royal correspondent India McTaggart joins us now. Andrew has been sort of written off already by the royal family. We kind of know all the details. No one likes Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor anymore in the UK. Does this really matter?
I think it still does, because as you mentioned, of course, they haven't been directly linked to Andrew, although it's highly likely that it is based on all the sort of evidence in the files, including Ghislaine referring to this invisible man as Andrew in the emails, him signing off as A, the sort of Peru trip that they talk about, which happened at exactly the same time that Andrew went to Peru to represent the late Queen for her Golden Jubilee in March 2002, which was, of course, terrible because the discussion was about procuring sort of fun, intelligent girls for him while he was there with this sort of like fixer tour guide figure. And also talking, as you said, about being up at Balmoral, talking about losing his valet at the exact same time that Andrew lost his beloved valet, Michael, which was also in 2001. He talks about how devastated he is, and we know from previous royal biographies that Michael was sort of somewhat of a father figure to him. And he mentions in the email, I've had him since I was 2 and was very close and all that. So, when you look at it on the face of it, it's, very likely that it's Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And as you say, yes, he has been written off in terms of the royal family's duties, in terms of his titles, in terms of everything that sort of mattered to him. But I still think this latest sort of Epstein emails tranche shows his character even further, and it's still shocking to read these emails. This is a member of the royal family we're talking about. This kind of language, the language about inappropriate friends, even if it was jokey, it's not appropriate for a member of the royal family.
And perhaps it raises more questions too, because so far the discourse around Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has focused almost solely on Virginia Giuffre, an individual who was 17 years old when he met her. Obviously, she was trafficked by Epstein, so that puts a different flavour on it. But this phrase, inappropriate friends, in countries like Peru, does lead us down a particularly darker path, does it not?
So to be clear, the inappropriate friends email was sent while he was asking Ghislaine how a trip to LA was, and he said,
right.
Did you find me any inappropriate friends there? And the Peru emails, he also did say, as for the girls, I'll leave that up to you, Ghislaine, and sort of the fixer tour guide she was talking to. But yes, you're right, it has focused a lot on Virginia Giuffre, obviously because of her accusations and the settlement that he made a few years ago with no sort of wrongdoing admit, but it's sort of still an important point to make that the language used is just not that sort of normal. And even the contacts that he was mixing with, it all just paints a very bad picture of his character. And I think that, of course, the king showed that he was able to take very tough action and a tough stance on this by stripping his younger brother of everything. But did it come at the right time? Has it come sort of a bit too late? Because in the court of public opinion, I think Andrew's already been found guilty.
Absolutely. Andrew's already been found guilty. The king acted basically when he possibly could, because obviously before he became king, his mother was the queen. Andrew was his mother's favourite child. Yes. Do you think this reflects badly on the late queen's memory, dare I say it?
Andrew was her favourite. She had an enormous soft spot for him. A lot of the more damning allegations came out later. She was also much later in her life and her reign when the settlement happened with Virginia Giuffre. So I think the extent of it sort of has become clear more recently. We know that Prince William, for example, takes a much harsher stance than the rest.
Thank
Well,
you.
India, thanks so much for talking us through this concerning story on Christmas Eve.
This interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN and their massive Christmas deal. Right now, you can get up to 80% off ExpressVPN. Every time you jump online to grab a last-minute gift, there's someone out there trying to grab your card details and passwords. ExpressVPN puts an encrypted shield between you and the cybercriminals, so you can protect your privacy, money, and identity. But hurry, this deal ends on the 26th of December, so scan the QR code or click the link in the description now.
There is a breaking development in the ongoing saga in the Epstein files case because new bombshell emails appear to involve Andrew Mountbatten Windsor asking Ghislaine Maxwell for inappropriate friends. The email, which was sent by a user calling themselves the Invisible Man, is signed off with the initial A. Well, in the message, the sender states that the girls were left completely shattered during a royal family summer camp at Balmoral. It's important to note that the emails do not allege any wrongdoing, and Andrew has repeatedly denied any misconduct. Well, I'm joined now by the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Greg, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, and Merry Christmas to you. There is a development here today, isn't there, because Trump has been urged to release the 700,000 remaining Epstein files. The Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, making that call today, and he's accused the Department of Justice of becoming Trump's shill.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me coming from Chuck Schumer. It's amazing the hypocrisy with him. You know, he had control of these documents while he was the Senate Majority Leader, as well as, you know, with Joe Biden in the White House. So, you know, it's just they're trying to make this an issue. They're trying to make it about President Trump. It's really not working. Although, you know, I feel like the president was in a difficult situation a few months ago when there was pressure both from the left as well as from his own party to release the documents. So they're releasing them, and that's what's happening right now. They've got 120 lawyers working on this, making sure the redactions are complete and making sure that none of the victims are exposed here. But it is kind of funny hearing from Chuck Schumer, and it's particularly hypocritical.
Well, we have seen the US Department of Justice online taking on rather more pointed commentary than it would normally. It seems the White House is running that account now as they're making direct claims, refuting claims that are found in these files about allegations about Donald Trump. They really are going on the offensive here, and they have to, because some of these claims that are in the files, which they say are, false and have been disproven before, there's going to be a bit more of that to come if we're only halfway through the release.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, this White House is really probably the most transparent administration we've ever had. I mean, they are very candid and they're trying to stay ahead of this. But I do think that, one point that really can't be overlooked is that if there was anything critically, negative about President Trump, this would have been released by the Democrats back in October of 24, during the election. So, obviously, they were in control of the documents. If there was anything bad in there, they would have either publicly released it or leaked it, like they often do with some of these emails. So, no, I'm not worried about anything about President Trump in there. I do think there will be some embarrassing moments for many people, many of whom weren't accused of any, legal wrongdoing. I think, President Clinton obviously is front page news right now because of, the photographs that were released. So, I don't think anything really good is going to come of this. I'm arguing just get it over with, really.
We're seeing that email just a moment ago, allegedly from Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He's obviously lost his Duke of York title. He's lost the honorific of His Royal Highness. He's no longer a prince. And what's curious, isn't it, is how offensive you're seeing the Trump team go in battling back on this issue. But when more details are revealed from the Epstein files when it comes to Andrew, there is that silence by contrast. I mean, I think the royal family, they've been hoping that this would all just go away by now, in particular after they took those, rather radical steps to remove those titles, to remove his home and all the rest of it. But it's still going on. They don't really have another card to play, unlike Trump's White House, who are able to, as I say, go on the offense.
Yeah. I mean, the White House, obviously, this has been the case for 10 years now. President Trump's not afraid to punch back. So if someone takes a swing at him, he will definitely punch back. It's a lot different with the palace, and I think they're in a delicate situation. In many ways, this is bigger news in the UK than it is here in the US. Because of Prince Andrew and, of course, the mishap with Peter Mandelson earlier this fall. So, there's been some, I think, relatively speaking, it's bigger news. The Democrats are trying to make it news here in the U.S., but now that these documents are being released, I think, or I hope anyway, that it goes away quickly.
Isn't it curious, Greg, that in all these files, most of them involving Americans, the only people, it seems, who've suffered any severe, life-changing, as it were, punishment as a result of being included in these files are British people. They're only people who seem to be suffering the consequences of this. Why do you think that is? What is it about the American system which has meant that those who are included in these files or have these embarrassing photos or these embarrassing letters they've written to Epstein and his associates just seem to sort of get away with it?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point, when you think about, Prince Andrew, Peter Mandelson, and of course, Ghislaine Maxwell. And it's also interesting that of all the bad behavior that went on, mostly predominantly by men, the only person in jail on this whole issue is Ghislaine Maxwell. So it doesn't necessarily make sense. I think, as I said, the palace has got a more delicate approach. They traditionally are more likely to just ignore or not to comment on things. That was impossible for Prince Andrew after that BBC interview, years ago. And I think, with the Americans here, it's much more transparent in many ways. And again, this particular White House is not afraid to punch back. I think you'll see some commentary from Bill Clinton. I think the former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, his career was basically ruined. I mean, he's not young, so maybe there wasn't a lot of runway left in his career, but he was teaching at Harvard Law School. He was doing public events, and he was essentially ruined by the emails that were released about a month ago. So yeah, there's definitely some scar tissue here too. But yeah, your point, Charlie. It's definitely weighted toward the UK.
Just very quickly, Greg, we've had this news overnight of these visa bans affecting 2 Brits in relation to actions that the US government is taking to combat censoriousness. It's a free speech intervention, they say. What's your take on that? And in particular, how it might affect UK-US relations, in particular with tech regulation, the Online Safety Act, and indeed Elon Musk's running of X?
Yeah, look, I think Sarah Rogers from the State Department is doing an incredible job. She actually appeared on GB News and made some comments, followed up on them. This is deadly. This is dead serious. She's serious. I think the State Department is doing the right thing because it's not only protecting Americans that are abroad or in Europe, but it's also protecting American companies. These are tech companies that are savagely attacked by the EU and the mass regulation that they have. So yeah, good for them, good for the State Department, and specifically Sarah Rogers for punching back.
Okay, Greg Swenson, Chairman of Republican Overseas UK, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon, and Merry Christmas.